To the microphone, Glenn Grunwald.
Good morning, Rob. Appreciate it very much. Yes, we're going to have the two Steves on, Steve Harmon, Steve Connor, talking about the throwback. These are the throwback Steves. Is what we have today. Is we're going to talk about Throwback Thursday, which is a very, very popular posting that we have. It comes out every Thursday. Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Steve Harmon.
Hello.
Good morning. Good morning to you. And guys, so glad you can spend some time. So we're gonna change it up a little bit in the 7:45 hour because we're going to talk about some of the old food establishments that we've had in Hutchinson, which Steve Harmon has found a couple different things. But let's go back to the Papa John's Corner, if you want to, that volume 112. That was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I remember when it was a quick trip. I was telling you, gentlemen, that I was born in Central Kansas, but we'd come up here for doctor appointments and a quick. It was a quick trip.
First.
It was. Yes,
yeah.
It was a quick trip first, and then it switched to a quick. Yeah. So I remember when it was a quick trip. So
see, Wichita tried to come in, and Dylan said no.
That's exactly what happened, and that's where Papa John's was a quick trip. And a lot of people would love to have a quick trip now. So, but now it's Papa John's. So talk about it. You don't want to lead it off here.
Well, the Bob Summers family had the Security Grain Company and started building elevators, concrete elevators, and they found themselves with a boatload of extra gas and went ahead and started a couple of filling stations around. Bob gave me some of those pictures of some of their original filling stations, and that particular filling station was kind of it went through a couple of ownerships too, and the Potter's Texaco was in there at one time, and people always remember it being on the northeast corner of 17th and Plum, but at one time it was in that original old gas station.
That's really interesting. If you go back to our March 6th edition of Throwback Thursday, you can see the pictures. It reminds me of that little filling station between here and Newton that's on the side of the road. They're kind of built like that. They were all kind of built like that, weren't they?
Well, all of them had a different design, but that kind of design on that one was real popular.
So then when did it start to become a different business to some extent? When the filling stations closed down? When did it become a quick trip?
Boy, I'm not sure I can tell you an exact year.
1982.
Yeah, 1982.
Is around 80.
That's what I thought. Is right around there then, and of course, then Papa John's is the location now. So that was one of the more interesting ones that you guys have had in a few weeks. So
the security elevator at C and Lorraine, which was their first project, I found a deal on that, a piece item that I had missed before, I guess. But anyway, it was completed in 1917 or 1918, and it was the largest single concrete structure west of the Mississippi as far as poured concrete goes. So.
Wow, that's a lot of concrete to talk about that. So I can see that.
Well, and then they got bigger after that, a lot bigger.
Then the next week you had the Massey Harris plant that was volume 113. Which one was to talk about that?
Well, that one, most people never even knew that was ever here. It was old enough.
Yeah,
we didn't know.
We didn't even know it until we ran across it. We acquired a Santa Fe collection of pictures that a professional photographer took, and that was in there. And we went, holy cow, where's that at?
We had just glossed over them looking at them on the screen because it's such a wide picture that they shot, and we couldn't tell really what it was. And then we figured out, what the building was, and then we zoomed in on the picture, and here are all these combines and tractors, and we didn't even know that they were building them here in Hutch.
And that was just an assembly plant here, but something about the war ended that because it was right during the war years that place was shut down, and it had to have something to do with steel construction, and they just couldn't make it fly anymore.
And I saw that you had the Master Manufacturing Tool Company came out of Dodge City and moved here and took that over. But that's about the time also when the different combines, self-propelled combines, started to come into.
Yeah, I think Massey is the one that developed those.
I believe so. The story has 1930s. They introduced the first self-propelled combine harvester, and it was the first four-wheel drive tractor as well. So that's back in 1930. So 95 years ago, a lot of history there. So where did you pick up those pictures at?
Like say the assembly plant. Well, the pictures that we got came from the Santa Fe collection. That's the only ones we have of that item. Until later on, we've got the other businesses that were in there, like the Board Foot and RL Pole.
The Santa Fe Railway commissioned a professional photographer to take pictures of every city it ran through, from Chicago all the way down to L.A. And the guy comes through and a block or two either side of the main railroad tracks. He just took pictures, and it was a great collection.
The photos and a railroad personnel traveled that corridor of the railroad track and shot on either side of the buildings. Supposedly what we were told was that was to set the tariff rates for the freight. Those were the people that were using the freight. So they were taking pictures of the property, I guess, to see how prosperous they were.
Interesting. Well, a lot of folks might remember RL Polk Company. They took over that building as well, and those were the ones with the yellow pages, basically, or
city directories.
City directories that they had all the way through Southwest Kansas, included with that. So that became that. Then they later became the Board Foot Company, I understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kevin Blything was in our Ambucks Club, and he was down on South Main, right just this side of the park entrance for a long time. And one of his biggest jobs was to produce the custom cabinetry for Dillon's for their salad bars. And so they went out to every store because that was a brand new thing that had happened. And I'm sure he had a lot of other big projects, but that's the one that I know about.
Outstanding. I want to remind you that Throwback Thursdays on Hutch Post are brought to you by the Hutchinson-Reno County Chamber of Commerce, as also the Stratica Kansas Underground and Museum as well. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to talk a little bit more about Throwback Thursday with the two Steves right after this. Welcome back. Steve Harmon and Steve Connor with us, talking about the Throwback Thursdays that we've had. The next one will take us to, and I thought this was really interesting, the old Carriage Works building. This would be the Carriage Works Volume 114 that we had on the 20th of March, if you want to go to Hutch Post and take a look at those. And where did this pop up at?
Well, that was actually one of my family's pictures. Yeah, my grandmother came up with that, and that was my great-grandfather in it. And that's where he, after moving to town here, that's where he started buying and hoarding furniture up on the second floor to save up to open his own furniture store. And I'm not sure what he did around the blacksmith shop there on the bottom, but that was one of his first jobs once he moved here from out west.
Well, that's also it was located, and folks want to know, it's 928 South Main, so it's way down on South Main. Of course, carriage at the turn of the century, 1900s, the carriages were very popular, and that was a lot of the growth of Hutchinson had to do with that.
Well, a good thing on that article was a picture of the Riverside Park roller coaster in the background too, and the trolley turnaround went down there too.
So a lot of the historical things, some of the folks might be remember that. So, how long did it operate? Do you know as a Carriage Works?
I'm not going to be able to. I think around
1909 was the earliest one that you found for that R.Y. Evans, and then it came in. And your grandfather was there in 1913.
I think the blacksmith shop was sold a couple of times, and then I think in 30 the current building was built.
Of course, that was your great grandfather, Vernon Harmon, and that was showed in the picture as well. And it moved from Ness City. Think about that for a second. That's back in that time. That would be a major move to Hutchinson. And I'm assuming that this is what brought him to Hutchinson, was to build this.
Oh, no, not really. Him and his father didn't get along, so he took off.
Well, sometimes that happens a little bit, but the carriage work way down on South End, like you said. You can see the old roller coaster from Riverside Park and the entrance now down by Cary Park. A lot of history with that there. So
we had 3 or 4 of the blacksmith shops in Hutch, and we've got them from the outside, but we have yet to seen one from the inside.
Interesting. Those were popular back in the day when you think about it. So
it was all a lot of horses.
Yeah, yeah. That's what you had to do then.
And our last one for the series that we're talking about in this segment of the morning show, volume number 115, Throwback Thursdays. I remember this well. Still is there. Plaza Towers.
Yes, that, as the article said, that location has only had 2 buildings on it its entire history, and that goes back to 1886, I think. And it's always been lodging in there, and just different hotels. What I found interesting in the conversion after the Bazzani closed down, we didn't have any hotels to speak of downtown that could do a convention center. So Ray Dillon and Vern Wiley got together and formed the Metropolitan Hotel Corporation. In fact, my uncle still got one of the stock certificates that he had bought to help fund that.
Of course, it was the Baker Hotel back in the day.
Yeah.
He was here for about 10 years, and that's what I guess most of us remember it as the best. So
Yeah.
I now remember also, a lot of folks remember and still do, the Baker Ballroom that was up there. That was really, that was everything from a ballroom to a gymnastics business that was up there for a while back in the later years.
I had my high school prom there.
So, what year was that, Steve?
1970.
High school prom back in 1970. But that's been around, and now it's as the Plaza Hotel with apartments, and they still have the ballroom up there. And in fact, the Fox had an event there not too long ago. So that was a historical building in downtown.
You know, one of the pictures in there is Jimmy Dean and Roy Clark. That hotel housed a lot of celebrities, some movie celebrities that came through to do movies, as well as all the state fair entertaining. And that's what Jimmy Dean was there for with that particular picture. And I've got several different pictures of other celebrities that were there too. Just kind of got to pick and choose which one you're going to put in.
Yeah, Mr. Garner just mentioned it also was known as the Baldwin Hotel, so different ones there. But yeah, it was a grand building. When you look at all the old Model A's that were out front of it, when you look at that article that you had up on Throwback Thursday, just the most recent one, the upper floor was also relabeled the Midland Hotel.
Yeah, there was actually a Midland Hotel at 2nd and Main, but that one got torn down in 1926, something like that, and maybe 29. Anyway, then they renamed that one over there on where the Baker was, the Midland. So there was kind of confusing at times. There was different Midland hotels.
because the big one was at 2nd and Main.
Right.
That was it. So, okay, we're going to have you gentlemen back on at 7:45. We're going to talk about some old food establishments eating establishments that were in Hutchinson. And Steve has found some new things to talk about. Bottom half of the hour news coming your way right here on KWBW Radio.
Glenn Grunwald.
Yeah, we have Steve Harmon and Steve Connor with us. They're our Throwback Thursday experts, and they have different photography collections of just about every place here in Hutchinson and Reno County. So you guys were talking about that you really need photographs, actual photographs, if families have actual photographs. Sometimes, and Steve Connor, you and I have talked about the postcards before when they became popular, and you find a few of those. But
right, but the photographs of the what happens is usually it's the family has one of the family member that worked there, sometimes out in front of the building like Steve found on the blacksmith shop, or they're inside. But that's sometimes where we get that outside picture of the building that we may not have had any other way. But then they come to us and we can usually get a copy of it, and that's what's great.
And Steve Harmon, you told me that Nation Meyer helped you with a lot of different collections over the years. He had a big collection that was really, really a gold mine for you guys.
Yeah, Nation was just great. He was kind of the early collector, and his family had some money, and they took and bought some pictures and original cabinet cards, they call them, really old, good ones. And he had like, what, 350, wasn't it?
334, I think. Yeah. And but he would his great grandfather would hire guys coming in, photographers off the train, and then send them out and tell him what he wanted pictures of, or just let them go out and shoot pictures. But anyway, that's where the oldest pictures of Hutchinson came from. And
then Nation would periodically, every 10 years or so, he'd get his little camera out and walk up and down the street and start taking pictures.
Yeah. I remember seeing some that he made a presentation at the Fox Theater at one time that had some around Hutchinson Community College, which was Hutchinson Junior College at the time, and it was absolutely nothing around. You'd see Gallon Stadium, hardly anything else around. So that's
some of those. In 1937, I think, he got his pilot's license. He was 17 years old and went up and took aerials of the new junior college, a lot of aerials.
The airport.
And so he's just up in a plane by himself, flying around taking
snapping
pictures.
That is, and now we have them in a collection, and they're outstanding. All right, we're going to talk about some of the food places now. Here locally, you have a lot of food places that start. Business goes maybe for 10 years and then it changes or goes belly up or whatever, but there's some old ones you want to talk about. But one of the older ones that we know of that are great sponsors here with BW is R&B Drive-In is one of the older ones around, and also you have a lot of other ones as well that are such as Roy's Hickory Barbecue that we know of that are still standing today. But talk about some of the, I'd say, obscure ones that you were able to locate.
Well, for a long time I was trying to find pictures of the Chuck Wagon bait shop, and that was in front of the Holy Cross Church. And a really funny story in that the gal that owned that, Vivian Preaser is her name, she would not sell that property. They had been there for so long, and it had been not only their house but a restaurant, and then she made it a bait shop, and she just would not sell. And the priest, right after they built Holy Cross Church, the priest in there would every lunchtime would go take a sack lunch over to her, trying to talk her into selling, and she finally did after a while. But that was when it was a restaurant with her and her husband. Her husband died, and then she turned it into this bait shop. And I found an article in newspaper archives, and she'd go out to the airport, and this was in 1963. She'd pick up 3 times a week, shipments of worms for the bait shop, and that was more of a front than anything else, because she ended up selling alcohol out the back door.
So alcohol out the back, but also worms sold in a restaurant up front.
Well, the restaurant wasn't there anymore.
Okay,
but, yeah,
all right.
But most people remember that building. It was kind of a log building, or type deal where it looked like it was logged, but it had several round windows, and that was evidently where it got the name of the Wagon Wheel restaurant and bait shop. But I remember neon in those windows because when I was a kid, I just remember those stood out a lot. But that's maybe a memory that's not true. I don't know.
I hunted for some pictures of that and couldn't. I went to Holy Cross and they just were too busy to even mess with me. And I happened to run into Larry McLean at the hardware store one day. He's a retired architect, and he was in on the design crew for building Holy Cross Church. He said, I think I might have some of those, and darn if he didn't.
Okay, so that's kind of how it works, word of mouth, and bumping into him at the hardware store. What other ones you want to talk about before we take a break?
It made me think about some of the places around that sold food and alcohol, sometimes illegally. And another good one was the Busy Bee Lunch, and it was down at the Santa Fe Railway Station, just a little building over at the side. And Pete Chumos owned that, and the people would get off the train, and he had a little Steve, what was the name of that wax paper stuff?
Glassine.
Glassine.
They were glassine envelopes that he'd put the sandwiches in.
He'd make sandwiches, and for the people that couldn't afford to go in the dining room, and you could get a sandwich wrapped up to go and a pint of vodka.
But he would go outside with his pots and pans when the trains would come through, because there was probably, at that time, a dozen trains that came through. But he'd go out there. He knew when they were going to land, and he'd go out there and bang his pots and pans trying to get them to come over to his little diner that probably had 6 seats in it, compared to the Basanti restaurant, hotel and restaurant. So it was an interesting story when we found out. They were located right behind the Hutchison News Building there at 2nd and Walnut.
He got arrested quite a few times, but his wife was even better. She got into a fight with a prominent Hutchinson woman down at Dillon's at B in Maine, and they took it out into the parking lot. And the police got called, and she was going to get arrested, and she took off in her Model A, and the cop was on the running board trying to get her out, and she went all the way to the Busy Bee Lunch to have her husband help her. But she finally got in.
Some historical stories about the Busy Bee Lunch.
A lot of that newspaper newspaper archives are just great. Sometimes it's a black hole. You find something and then it leads to something else. And like say, I was looking for Busy Bee lunch stuff and heard about Pete Chumos's wife.
That's outstanding. Well, I remember you had pictures before, of course, it was right around that same intersection right there. There was a hotel on the corner where Daylight Donuts is now, and there was different businesses, but did not know about the Busy Bee lunch and diner right there.
And another one was the Shamrock Diner. That's where the DCI Park is now.
Okay.
So in between the hotel that used to be there and the Wolcott building, there was this little Valentine diner there. And this was during Prohibition, okay? They sold Budweiser by the keg or by the bottle. And I started thinking about that. How do you do that, you know? Well, that's where they came to the term of cereal malt beverage. If you got down to 3.2, you can't get drunk on it, can you? And so that's why they were able to sell Budweiser keg or bottle during Prohibition there.
So it was considered not to be alcohol if it was 3.2% alcohol.
Yeah.
Really. That's funny. So we're going to take a break. We're going to talk about some other old food establishments that Steve has found here in Hutchinson right after this little timeout. Welcome back. About 4.5 minutes left on this portion here with the two Steves, Steve Harmon and Steve Connor, talking about their collection that they have. Throwback Thursdays, where we get all their information from. But we're talking about old eating establishments. And Steve Connor, you just mentioned was it the Ranch House? What was it?
The Ranch House Restaurant at 25th and Main. It was in that little strip. I think it's called the State Fair or Strip Mall now, or parking. But it was right in the corner of it. It's been a sandwich shop just recently. It was a beauty shop before that. But from somewhere in the 1950s, because it came in the 50s series postcards, to mid-60s, that was a restaurant there, and I remember going and eating there with my folks.
What other strange ones do you have, Steve Harmon?
Well, the big one was in 1972, down on South Plum, the Robert R. Lee, not Robert E. Lee, Robert R. Lee Barbecue and Fried Chicken. And that was the place that Ken Kennedy was killed, Officer Ken Kennedy.
Yes.
And him and another officer went in there for a Saturday night alcohol sting and got found out about. And it wasn't the owner that had this problem. A gal named Helen Fletcher was a cook in back, and she was an older gal. And when the action went down, she came out back with a gun ablazing and shot both of them. And Ken Kennedy died, and the other one got hit in the head or something and was taken out of action as a policeman from then on. But that was a pretty bad one right there. And down at the museum, they've got the original gun that was there. And I've got pictures of, after the shooting, someone kicked it under a refrigerator there. And there's some of the evidence that I got from the police department. And let's see,
that's a little over 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's more recent than some
the Highway 61 is named after, there's a little sign out there, Ken Kennedy Freeway. And that's what the story was on him. So
I think the Hutchinson Theater Guild, which is now Stage 9, or doing business at Stage 9, also did Talking Tombstones with one of the characters that had to do with that as well. So interesting.
Yeah.
What other food places? As we got about a couple minutes left here.
Yeah, I think that's all my.
Well, there were a number of Valentine diners here in town. They came over from Wichita. They were manufactured over in Wichita, and you could get several different varieties as far as how many seats it had, how many booths it had. But they looked like almost like a camper without wheels kind of
just
thing.
Like the Silver Bullets.
Right.
Kind of like,
and they would sit those things on the lot, and that's like, say, the one they were about
there's
Second Main.
one left in town, and the Double Bubble dog wash.
bath.
Yes.
Yeah, that thing's been there forever, and it used to be a liquor store. It used to be a Deming photo drop. It shifted around to a lot of things, but there was a ton of those things here in town.
They would pop up and be different diners and different things. So that's one thing that Hutchinson's always had, is some different interesting food establishments. Of course, one of the most well-known ones anywhere, Skates Diner up on North Main as well. Just keeps trucking right along. And then, of course, you had some also that Bernard's, of course, barbecue. That
B&D is the one that gets
B&D.
talked about the most over on 2nd Street. So
that's very interesting. So, well, any special project? Got about a minute left that you're always working on something. And you want people that if they have photographs.
Well, we got a couple new pictures just this week. One where they had it labeled as the soda ash plant, but we really think it's Morton Salt, and of their furnaces that fed the pans to evaporate the salt off. Now, they did use the same process out at the soda ash plant, so we've got to figure out why those say. But since they're marked Morton Salt, we're pretty sure that they just goofed and put the wrong thing on the backside. But anyway, that's where we come in with the detective work. So.
All right, so you guys are detective work on different newspapers, and you're right. Some of the stories in the old newspapers are pretty hilarious if you want to follow those. Thanks, guys. We'll have you back next month as well. We'll talk about more Throwback Thursdays. Anybody that has any old pictures they find, they want to be sure and get a hold of Steve Connor or Steve Harmon. You can connect with them right through the radio station here. Top of the news coming your way on KWBW at 8 o'clock. We'll be right back.